it's actually dangerous to people's health. When you lose power, we're not talking about our street lost power because the line went down and they'll fix it tomorrow. We're talking a huge, large section of a state or multiple states. Mort Webster, professor of energy engineering. What happens to the power grid when it's very hot is people turn on air conditioning, which uses electricity. And so the hotter the day in general, the more the electricity demand goes up, and we require more and more electricity be generated on those days. If you don't exactly match supply and demand, the system doesn't work. So if demand goes too high, we essentially shut down portions of the grid and there's a big power outage. Heat waves have been around for a long time, and we've had air conditioning a long time. It was not necessarily an issue in the past. There are two things that are changing now. One thing is that the frequency and the intensity of these heat waves seems to be increasing. The other thing that happens is where we get our power from has been in the process of evolving from a mostly fossil fuel based system where we burn coal, oil, and gas to make electricity to one that has a lot more wind and solar generation in it. Wind and solar power generates when there is wind and when there is sun, and when there is not, they don't produce as much. And they produce what they can produce in each moment. And what the system does now is it uses the other kinds of electricity supply that is controllable to fill in the gap, literally every second, every minute, to match the shortfall between what we demand at that moment, what is coming out of wind and solar and hydro, and then it makes up the difference and it turns the other power plants up and down, on and off. A lot of those traditional fossil fuel based generators those power plants are going offline and retiring because they can't compete economically. And so there's less of the thing you need to fill in the gap and bigger gaps that go up and down in terms of that shortfall of supply. It's become difficult to justify investments in the sort of backup power reserves so that on the really hot days or the really bad cold snaps or the wildfires in California, when things have to be reconfigured, we don't have the spare capacity. There needs to be some sources of electricity so that when these renewable sources are not operating but we still want power, there's another place to get it from that we can control. That requires investments. That costs money. And in a lot of the country where we have a market-based system, we have to have essentially, you need some sort of incentive for those power supply, for those power plants that will give you the power when you need them, but it has to be economical for them to sit there when you're not using them. So there's a lot of fight against these investments, saying we don't need them. And what happens is every time you drive and you don't have a flat tire, you think, I didn't need that spare. But on the day you get a flat, you're going to be glad you had it. Guess what? It costs you a few dollars more. This is sort of a society-wide. Do we want to pay a little bit more and have the extra reserves to be resilient? Or do we want a bare bones cheapest system, which means if anything goes wrong, you're going to be out of power?
Perfect.